more and more Americans are finding it hard to make ends meet with the money they earn. This is happening because we are going through a tough economic time that some folks are starting to call the silent depression. It's like a period in the past when the economy was really bad called the Great Depression, which happened from 1929 to 1941. The reason they call it the silent depression is because the government hasn't officially recognized it, but regular people are feeling the pinch in their wallets. That's why you might have seen videos on social media platforms like TikTok with millions of views comparing 2023 to the Great Depression.
I want to show you the numbers on what the average income was during the Great Depression to now. So 1930, the average net yearly income of Americans annually was $4,887.
So if we check out data from the government's official website, bls.gov, we can see some interesting stuff. Back in 1930, an individual's income of around $4,900 would be equivalent to over $87,000 in today's money, per person, not per household. But obviously, the average person today isn't making anywhere near $90,000 a year, unlike during the Great Depression. So what's happening here? The video then goes on to reveal that in 2019, the average person was earning just over $31,000 per year in the United States. This was the average income for one American. So it really seems like we might be going through a kind of silent depression, which is quite shocking. It's hard to believe that we might be experiencing a time potentially worse than the worst economic period in US history. However, as I delved deeper into the data, I realized it was quite cherry-picked to fit a particular narrative because that's what gets the most attention on social media. The truth is, things aren't as bad as the Great Depression, but they could certainly be better. It's important to keep things in perspective. First, let's clarify that the worst years of the Great Depression are typically considered to be between 1932 and 1934, when the stock market hit its lowest point, losing over 80% of its value. During that time, the average person was not earning $4,800 per year. Instead, the average income across all industries was closer to $1,400 per year, which, when adjusted for today's dollars, is closer to $30,000 per year. That's the real income of the 1930s. Now, let's compare that to today. I wanted to see how today's income measures up, considering the wage growth we've seen since the start of the pandemic. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, showed that the median income across all age groups and industries was closer to $50,000 per year in 2022. So, when it comes to income, we're doing a lot better today than we were in the 1930s. But let's dig deeper and look at the costs of the essentials: transportation, food, and housing. In 1932, Ford introduced its replacement for the Model A, called the Model B. It could comfortably seat 5 people, had a V8 engine with 65 horsepower, and could reach speeds of up to 75 miles per hour. It looked great, and a brand new one cost $460, which, in today's terms, is about $10,000. That's about a third of a person's income in 1932 for a brand new car.
Ruth Shelley and Robert Ostman. And they love the 1930s so much that what have they done, Ruth?
Well, they've ditched their modern lives to immerse themselves completely in the era. And as you can see, that is Ruth's home there, where we're joining them this morning.
Why are you so fond of the 1930s? Have you taken a good look at the prices of food and housing nowadays? That's precisely why. Let's delve into these aspects in detail. Finding concrete data on food expenses from the 1930s is a bit challenging because there isn't a wealth of information available about what people spent on groceries back then. However, here are some price points from that era that might give you some insight. A dozen eggs, for instance, would set you back a mere 18 cents, and a pound of chicken was only 20 cents. In general, everything was significantly cheaper compared to people's incomes at the time. Now, let's shift our focus to housing and prepare to be amazed. Even in 1940, the median home value was a mere $2,900, which was approximately double the annual salary at the time. However, fast forward to today, and you'd find that the median home price in 2023 was a staggering $416,000, which is a whopping 8.3 times the median income of $50,000. But here's where things get interesting. What did a house from the 1930s actually look like? According to information from the peoplehistory.com, here are some real home listings from that era that give us a glimpse into what housing was like back then. Imagine being able to buy a 4-bedroom bungalow in Nebraska for just $2,100. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly is a bungalow? Well, it's typically a single-story house with a sloped roof, often featuring a porch or balcony out front. It might look something like this. If you found a house in 1932 with 4 bedrooms for $2,100, that would be equivalent to finding a 4-bedroom house today that was worth $75,000. Here's another gem. In Lima, Ohio, you could snag a house for $2,500. And if you were looking for a bit more space, how about a 10-acre farmhouse in Sheboygan, Wisconsin for just $1,900? Or a 5-bedroom beauty in Hammond, Indiana for a mere $2,000. The list of affordable housing options from the 1930s goes on and on. The bottom line is this. Even though our incomes have roughly doubled since 1932, the relative purchasing power of the US dollar has significantly declined. What's truly intriguing is that even though the average person might not analyze this data every day, they can feel its impact when asked about how much money they believe they need to live comfortably. So, when you think about living in the 1930s, it's not just a longing for the past, it's a recognition of how economic realities, particularly in terms of housing and food costs, have shifted dramatically over the decades, reshaping our perceptions of financial comfort. And below. In my Patreon Love You Thank. The current landscape is marked by some concerning trends. Healthcare expenses have shot through the roof, and the cost of attending college has skyrocketed. Meanwhile, purchasing a home has become an increasingly expensive endeavor. Yet, amidst all these challenges, there's a notable absence of good news about wage growth. Why is that? It's essential to recognize that the prices of pretty much everything have outpaced the reported 15% wage growth. This wage growth figure might sound promising on the surface, but it pales in comparison to the relentless surge in living expenses. Let's break down the average budget for the year 2023. After accounting for taxes, the median take-home pay stands at around $3,300 per month. Out of this, a substantial chunk, $2,000, goes straight towards rent, leaving little room for financial maneuvering. Another $690 is allocated to food expenses, and nearly $100 is reserved for healthcare. This already totals up to $2,790, nearly exhausting the monthly budget. But wait, we haven't even factored in the costs of commuting to work. The average car payment is approximately $500 per month for a used car and a staggering $700 per month for a new one. This takes the total monthly expenditure to over $3,300, surpassing the average American's entire monthly budget. It leaves little room for addressing other financial responsibilities like paying off student loans and credit card debt. To make matters worse, the interest rates on these saving for retirement. It's no wonder that a staggering 72% of Americans do not feel financially secure in the current economic climate. To combat rising inflation, the Federal Reserve has implemented 11 interest rate hikes since March 2022. However, more than a third of Americans have expressed that these rising interest rates have hindered their pursuit of financial comfort. Interestingly, the 1930s, often considered a dark period in economic history, had some advantages over our current situation. During that era, the Federal Reserve dropped its interest rate to below 2% and maintained it there for the entire decade to stimulate the economy. In contrast, our modern times have seen interest rates rise due to inflation and increasing costs, making borrowing money even more challenging.